Good evening. I'd like to get the hearing started. This is the Town of East Long Meadow 2013 budget hearing. My name is Russell Denver. I'm the chair of this year's Appropriations Committee. I'm going to walk you through where we currently are with respect to the fiscal year 2014 budget. I then will turn it over to Eric Madison, who is the chair of the Capital Planning Committee, who in turn will turn it over to Superintendent Gordon Smith on behalf of the school committee. So, very quickly, the committee members are, on the screen, our individual with the most experience is Jim Broderick, who has been on for nearly 19 years. And our rookie is Dawn Starks, who's been on for her second year. So we're glad to have both of them. We have people who are on the committee who are lifetime residents of East Long Meadow, business owners in East Long Meadow. We have finance people, we have an attorney, we have business owners, we have people who, with children in the school system, people who've sent their kids through the school system, and actually committee members who actually were graduates of East Long Meadow Public School System. We have a very diverse group, and I'm happy to say that they invest a lot of their personal time into this committee. So this is how we handle our responsibilities. Primarily, we prepare and recommend budgets for the annual town meeting and for special town meeting. We recommend policies and procedures that we believe are fiscally sound, one of which we will go into a little bit later about maintaining adequate reserves so the town has sufficient funding to cover additional expenses, similar to the storm of 2011. How we do our work, our budget methodology. We spend a great deal of time projecting revenues, taxes, local receipts, and state aid. We spend a lot of time with our departments, reviewing their expenses and additional assessments. We spend, as Eric Madison will talk about, a lot of time reviewing capital projects. And these requests come from all departments, and they are anything over $25,000 that needs to be bonded in any way, shape, or manner. We also then review all the financial warrant articles that are submitted, and in this year's town warrant there are several, which we will go over a little bit later. And then, throughout the course of the budget cycle, we spend a great deal of time with each department. Each member of the Appropriations Committee is a liaison with a number of town departments. So they will meet individually with department heads and or committees or boards representing those departments, and we'll try to understand their budgets and the rationale for their expenditures and their requests. We spend a great deal of time looking at revenues and see what additional revenues that we might be able to access on behalf of the town. Our calendar is as follows. In October, we look at the budget guidelines. In November, we review the guidelines, or each liaison reviews the guidelines with each department or board or committee. We distribute town budget forms for all the departments to follow. And in December of 2012, all of the town departments are busily putting together their fiscal year 14 budgets. And in January, we asked for all the town department budgets to be prepared back to the Appropriations Committee. This year, we had a couple of departments that were a little late. We showed a great deal of respect due to the fact that the Board of Selectmen had 2 brand new members. We granted them a little more time to look at all their departments and be better prepared when they made recommendations to the Appropriations Committee. And then in January, a very big event happens on behalf of the town. It's when the governor releases his preliminary budgets. And in the governor's budget, he makes recommendations on state aid. It is this number that we use to determine our process for our revenue that we can begin to build our budget on. The governor's budget sometimes is taken by us and increased. This year we are going to increase that projection by about 33%, because in the past the governor's number has been a little underfunded by the House of Representatives. And then in February and March, the Appropriations Committee meets each Thursday. We meet again with all the department heads and the boards and committees, and we start to have a clearer picture of what our budget is going to be. And then in April, starting with this meeting, we do a little more fine-tuning. More budget numbers come out, more revenue numbers come out. There are articles that are submitted to the Board of Selectmen to be put on the annual town meeting warrant that might require free cash or a raise and appropriate, and it's that time that we are able to review all of those. And then the annual town meeting this year will be Monday, May 20th, 2013, and I would urge all town residents to attend. So each year, like many Massachusetts cities and towns, we face budget challenges. About 5 years ago, the Appropriations Committee saw that we were spending nearly $1 million a year in free cash to balance the operating budget of the town of East Long Meadow. As a committee, we voted to implement a strategic plan in which we would reduce the amount of free cash used to balance the operating budget by $250,000 per year for the next 4 years. I'm happy to say we have gone from $1 million to $750,000 the next year to $500,000 last year to preliminarily using $250,000 this year. We have not yet made a final decision on that number, but we are clearly following our path and sticking to our plan. The other budget challenges which many cities and towns face is still the unknown number for state aid. Primarily consists of education funding and lottery funding, and for East Long Meadow, it represents nearly 20% of our revenues each and every year. We spend a lot of time with town departments to see how we can get the best services for the residents of the town. And as Eric Madison will discuss in a few minutes, we take a great deal of pride in trying to ascertain what the capital projects are needed which will benefit all of the residents of the town of East Long Meadow. This year, the Appropriations Committee, in conjunction with the capital planning, are going to try to undertake a very aggressive capital project spending plan, which I think will benefit not only the school facilities, but also the town at large. And then lastly, we look to see how we can maintain the reserves in the free cash and the stabilization funds to have sufficient dollars in case of emergencies. Well, I'm going to give you some positive developments while they do that. A couple of years ago, the town implemented quarterly billing for tax bills, and it has improved cash flow and has reduced the need to do additional borrowing. There's been a limited amount of additions to staff, and I'm very happy to say, with the good offices of the Department of Public Works, we've instituted many energy efficiency measures, which has really stabilized the utility costs for the town. A number of years ago, the Board of Selectmen adopted home rule legislation which allowed for a change in health insurance for retirees and for town employees, and it has resulted in a lower than national average increase in health insurance costs for those retirees and for the town employees. And there has been no additional dollars put from raise and appropriating through taxation for capital projects. And lastly, the major storm of 2011, there's been over 75% reimbursement of the cost. And that's really been a combined effort with the Public Works, town accountant, and others to make sure that the town has received all of its appropriate reimbursement. So as we're sitting here tonight, this is the preliminary budget summary. As you can see, projected sources and uses. And as of right now, the Appropriations Committee is hard at work at closing this preliminary budget gap of approximately $502,000. I will get into that in a little bit later. Go ahead. So the major sources and uses. As you can see, the town is heavily invested in property taxes for revenue, nearly 68%. You can see several miscellaneous accounts and saw the state aid, which I had mentioned. which is still the magic number that we're all waiting to know more about. The problem with the state aid number, we may not know that number until after annual town meeting. That is really a function of the Massachusetts House of Representatives and State Senate, and there are days, or there are years where we may not know that till after July 1st. So it's somewhat difficult for the Appropriations Committee to have a firm number on that revenue in which to build the budget. You can see the expenses. Town-wide expenses are things like health insurance and retirement and utilities, long-term debt and interest at 9%, and departmental expenses. And you can see the budget gap of a little over $500,000. These are what we anticipate to be changes this year. You can see property taxes, nearly a 10% increase. Debt exclusions, there's a reduction. Local receipts, things like excise tax, so forth. We anticipate a smaller amount coming in this year. State revenue and reimbursements, there's the Chapter 70 number that I referenced, the lottery, other state aid, and the town-wide budgets. These are all preliminary numbers, but it'll give you a good guess or a good feel for what we're looking at. Health and life, that is the health insurance for retirees and employees. Retirement, which I need to spend a minute on. A number of years ago, the Hampden County Retirement Board allowed the cities and towns in Hampden County kind of a break on the amount of money that they needed to invest each year for their costs for the retirees. There's now a 3-year kind of restructuring. So last year, this year, and next year, the town of East Long Meadow will need to contribute $183,000 more each year to kind of do the catch-up on this. So that's an expense that will be there again next year. We did make some changes. We reduced the amount of money in the reserve fund. We had increased it 1 year to $450,000 to cover anticipated collective bargaining agreements. As of right now, there are a number of town employee unions that don't have settled contracts, so we decided to reduce that to $300,000. The long-term debt and interest budget. You can see the town has been very vigilant in doing additional bonding to take advantage of lower interest for their bonds. And you can see the savings associated with that. And then we'll quickly run through the preliminary department budgets. The Appropriations Committee is primarily a very conservative group of individuals when it comes to finances. Just about every change or addition that you will see here has been vetted over a 2 to 3 year period with the Appropriations Committee. I'll just start with the fire department as an example. Each of the last number of years, repairs to fire department equipment has run over budget, and then they've come back to the appropriations for a reserve fund request. We just felt it was appropriate to adequately fund that so they wouldn't have to come back for a reserve fund request. Information technology, more and more of the town operations require use of software, and software licenses and maintenance agreements continue to go up. They don't go down. Treasurer, this is for replacing a half a position that has been vacant in that office for the last number of years. The Board of Selectmen, Council on Aging, and Accounting are doing some shifting of town personnel within those departments, which the Appropriations Committee has vetted over the last number of years, and we believe the additions to these departments are going to better serve the residents of the town of East Long Meadow. Recreation is an additional staff increase, small staff increase, and the inspector is the same. We were approached by the Board of Selectmen, and we vetted this for a number of years. There will be a full-time administrative staff that will be joining the building inspector. We believe that having an individual there day in and day out, 8 hours a day, keeping track of all the permits and so forth will better serve the residents of the town. And lastly, some of the smaller departments. The cultural number, just because that's a very large decrease. Last year, the Appropriations Committee made the decision to pull the cost of the 4th of July parade out of the cultural and have the residents vote on that as a separate article. I'm happy to say that it passed last year. It will show up again as a warrant article, and the Appropriations Committee has recommended its approval for the annual town meeting. The two of the larger departments is the school department. As you can see that they have requested a 4.9% increase this year. In the police department, the Board of Selectmen, as the police commissioners, have requested a 5.3% increase. Superintendent of Schools Gordon Smith will speak directly to the 4.9% dollar amount. DPW, pretty much self-explanatory. They came in as requested with a level services budget. Again, I want to say how happy we are with the DPW. They continue to do an outstanding job. One only need to drive East Long Meadow streets during a snowstorm and then drive into Springfield and see the difference. So we're very happy with that. So these are some of the assessments that we have to deal with as a town. So this year, when Eric Madison gets up to give the report of the Capital Planning Committee, he's going to indicate that this year the Appropriations Committee will not be recommending any raise and appropriate from taxation for capital projects, that there will be an aggressive plan to use free cash for capital projects. So that number has, there's no money in that number right there. And then there's money for abatements, state charges, snow and ice deficit. And the one number that I want to end with, which I think is very important because it goes back to the policies and procedures that the Appropriations Committee looks at and tries to maintain, is that we try to maintain a healthy reserve for the town and for the town budget. The Massachusetts Department of Revenue suggests that every city and town have between 5 and 8% in reserve of the total operating budget. And you can see what the reserves have been for the town of East Long Meadow for the last number of years. This is a number that we spent a lot of time on. We spent a lot of debate on what we should be doing with this reserve on behalf of the residents of the town of East Long Meadow. I think that's why you'll be, I think, pleasantly surprised with the capital planning process, in which we will use a fair amount of money for capital projects to the benefit of everyone in town, but it will also then reduce the amount of reserve we have, but still maintain the 5 to 8% recommendation from the Department of Revenue. And I think we're taking questions at the end after all the presentations. So now I'd like to turn it over to Eric Madison.
Thanks, Russ. I'm going to try to whiz right through this before we have another power failure here. My name is Eric Madison. I'm the chairman of the Capital Planning Committee this year. Hey, Tom, keep up here. Our committee members, myself, most of these folks, I'm relatively new to the committee. Most of these folks have been on here for many years and have an awful lot of history that they can contribute to the committee, and it works very well. Connie Wasbicki, Steve Loyak, Rocco Carabetta, Ryan Quimby's on the committee, and our newest member, Tom O'Connor, who was just appointed this year and has been a great asset to the committee. By the nature of his position, the town accountant also serves as the ex officio member. So this year, for fiscal year 14, there were 51 projects submitted to the Capital Planning Committee for review, totaling just below $3.6 million. So obviously the work of the Capital Planning Committee was pretty steep, considering there's really no way we could afford $3.6 million in capital projects. So the objectives that we set out for: we first evaluate each project based upon some pre-established criteria, and I'll get to that criteria in a little bit. We then prioritize all the projects that were submitted to us based on our evaluation, assigning number one to what we consider the highest priority, and right on down through all 51 projects. So when we're done, there's priority number 1 and priority number 51. As we go along, we try to assign the projects to the various different funding sources. And working with that, we work with the departments to close any existing capital projects, and I'll tell you why that's important. If we funded a capital project for $200,000 at last year's annual town meeting, and they completed that project for $190,000, that leaves a $10,000 balance that we can then use as a portion for this fiscal year's capital projects. So we work very closely with the departments to close out projects when they're complete, so we can use any remaining balances. We work very closely with the Appropriations Committee to establish the budget for new spending, and Russ alluded to that. I'll speak to that in a little bit. And then ultimately, we hope to recommend our projects with matching funding at the annual town meeting, and that's obviously our end goal. So after we review and submit each of the projects, each project is placed in at least one, can be more than one, of the following categories. Public safety. These are obviously projects that are intended to maintain or improve the public safety or department's ability to operate safely. A government mandate, and that's kind of self-explanatory. It's any mandate required by the state or federal government needed to maintain a service we already offer. Capital infrastructure maintenance, and that's just simply the maintenance of our buildings and assets in towns and our systems. Improved operations, which is the improvement to programs, operations, and services delivered to the community. Energy efficiency, and there's been many projects that have come before the committee that have improved the efficiency of our buildings and stuff in town, and as Russ alluded to, has over the years added up to some significant savings. Quality of life, which is the improving or maintaining the quality of life for our residents or enhancing our community. And finally, new operations. And these are new services not previously funded by the town. So these next 3 slides, and I handed out to you folks a lot of these because I'm not sure how visible they are here, but it basically in no particular order, in other words, these are not as prioritized, is an outline of the various projects that were submitted to us, the department that submitted the project, and all the way in the right-hand column is the estimated cost of each of those projects. And as you can see, if you go through this list, there's obviously a significant number of projects and cost associated with each one. Tom, if you go to the third, keep going, one more. Now, this list that you'll see is, these are projects that are not going to make it to the capital planning process this year for a variety of reasons. Either you'll see these projects appear as a warrant article by themselves at annual town meeting. They did not fit the criteria as established by the town bylaws for the capital planning, or in most of these cases, they were withdrawn by in this case, the school committee, pending the outcome of a study that is now being conducted on their facilities, where we jointly agreed that to spend money now for something that may be changed as a result of this study would not be spending the taxpayers' money wisely. The typical funding sources. General fund, which is money raised by taxation, including free cash, and free cash is a term that's thrown around here quite frequently, but basically it's an undesignated fund in those monies from previous fiscal years that went unspent, builds into our free cash payment, or our free cash account. The water fund, which is obviously revenues generated from residents paying their water bills. The sewer fund, revenues generated from residents paying their sewer bills. Closed capital projects, and I spoke to that a little bit earlier, any funds remaining from projects we funded in the past. And then special accounts. And that's revenue raised for a specific purpose, used only to support that purpose. An example of that would be the LCAT account. So the work we still have remaining, we've completed, I'd say, about 80 or 85% of our work for this year. But we need to finalize placing our projects in their specific categories and complete the prioritization of each project. The hardest part of that is matching projects to the available funding when that funding is determined. And we're not quite there on all the funding, as Russ alluded to. There's many unanswered questions. And then ultimately at annual town meeting is to bring you prepared recommendations for your approval. This year, actually over the last 3 or 4 years, capital planning has struggled because we've been really limited on our funding. Over many years, we have bonded many of our capital projects, and we reached a point where the Appropriations Committee was uncomfortable incurring any new debt until we paid off some old debt. Just like you with your home, you don't want to have more loans than you have income to pay. So for the last few fiscal years, it's been very difficult because we've been trying to avoid incurring any new debt. Along with that came some tight fiscal times and reductions in the state aid, and it left us in a very tough predicament for funding capital projects. I think if you speak to any department head, they'll tell you that a lot of projects have gone unfunded that have really had an impact on the town services. This year, the Capital Planning Committee and the Appropriations Committee had a lot of conversation, and we feel confident in recommending to the town that we spend a significant amount of the free cash that I alluded to earlier, the undesignated funds. And we're going to bring a package to you at annual town meeting that recommends the usage of probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million of free cash to fund a lot of these projects that haven't been being funded, particularly over the last 3 years. Hopefully, as we continue to develop a sustainable budget that is not reliant upon free cash to fund it over the fiscal years, in the next couple years, we're going to have built into this just a natural mechanism of funding for capital projects, so we don't hit the years like we've just kind of come out of, where we're continuously and routinely funding projects in the town to help maintain the services. That's it. Gordon, I think it's yours.
Oh, good evening. I'm Gordon Smith, Superintendent of Schools. Apologize for the delay. I'm joined this evening by our school committee, all over here, all members of our school committee, and our members of the East Longmeadow Public School leadership team. And it's our pleasure to walk you through the FY14 budget request for the East Longmeadow Public Schools. Hopefully in a moment we'll have it up behind us. But basically, the school systems budget, and you've heard me say this every year, is the one element that impacts every student in the system and is the greatest strategic element to move our district forward. So this is a process that certainly all departments have taken very seriously, and the school department considers very carefully as to how and what initiatives we're looking to move forward as we put together a budget development or a budget process. Is it, Ryan?
It's coming on now. It'll get brighter as it keeps going.
Good, back on track. Just to give you an idea, some of the things we looked at as we put this budget request together this year is we look at our past spending. And you can go on the Department of Education's website and take a look at some of this financial information. They have a product or a system called their DART, their District Analysis Tool, and it gives you comparison among districts, not only in financial, but also around some of the programs, some of the testing, and different things school systems are doing. If you take a look at the graph behind me, East Long Meadow, this is per pupil spending. East Long Meadow is the solid or thick red line, and it certainly is on an upward trend, which is a good thing. The broken black line is the state average for per pupil expenditures, and the districts around us, this is the districts in the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative. These are the 7 districts with whom we work and exist in a collaborative and share costs around specific programming, special education programming, vocational programming, and so forth. If you were to go to the Department of Education's website, you would see these districts, East Bridgewater, Foxborough, Norton, and a few other districts with whom the Department of Education feels we are best compared. And again, we're sort of in the middle. We're on an upward trend per pupil expenditures, which is a good thing. We're investing in our future, investing in our students, but we're below the state average, which is the broken black line. Professional development. Again, what are we investing in to make sure that our teachers are at their best on a daily basis when they are working with our students? You can see over time there was sort of a flat line and a downward trend, and we're starting to come up in FY10 and FY11. The state average is the broken black line at the top, and we are again the thick red line. That's taking a look at the districts that the Department of Education compares us with. The last few years, as I've developed the budget with our leadership team and school committee, we've talked about things like interim assessment, things like instructional coaches, and we've been able to achieve that, and some of the results are starting to come in. This is just a look at our composite performance index on the MCAS exam, which is a state assessment system, and you can see we've consistently been strong in the ELA testing. Slight increases, say, from 2010 to 2011, relatively the same, 2011, 2012. You see that there's been some up and down with math. That's been an area of a challenge, and we're starting to increase 2012. You can see that there was a slight increase between 2011 and 2012, and the science and technology exam is a relatively new exam. One of the things that we've been able to put in place is our interim assessment, where our students in grades 2 through 10 are tested periodically in English language arts and math, and we can take a look at how they're doing against current state standards and what challenges remain so that we can actually meet them during the school year at their point of learning. What this also can do for us is start to predict throughout the school year where our students will be as they hit that state assessment. And as you can see, in just the 2 years we've been able to give this exam, we're starting to see upward trends. The blue line is our primary grades, the green line is a district look, and the red line is a secondary look. And these, when it says they're predicted to pass, that's proficient or above. Proficient or above is where we want our students on state assessments. This is a look at the math. You can see that we're seeing some real improvement there where the lines are starting to go up much quicker than in the ELA. Now, as we continue to move forward, one of the things that is really an incredible benefit and advantage of being in the East Long Meadow Public Schools is that people are communicating and coordinating their efforts, and they are moving forward together. One of the things that we've been able to put in place is right now we have 3 instructional coaches. This has been an interesting concept, a difficult concept at times to explain. But what these individuals do, these are highly trained professionals who have been classroom teachers, have gone on to advanced graduate study, are versed in the best instructional practices around literacy, around math, and what they can do is, if they're in your system, that means they know your challenges, they know your staff, and most importantly, they know your students. and they can work throughout the year. It's not a group coming in on one day. They can work throughout the year consistently with the staff. And these are numbers as of January. At the Birchland Park Middle School, our instructional coaches have been able to deliver 306 hours of English language arts professional development. And in math, 317 hours. And that was in January. This is still going on. At the elementary level, where we only have one, we share between 2 elementary schools, we've been able to deliver 326 hours of professional development. And then, stretching this individual's day, we've been able to add an additional 20 hours of voluntary professional development outside the workday. And we've had staff come to that voluntary professional development because the educators in our schools are incredibly professional and want to continue to get better at their craft. If you think about that in terms of dollar value, professional development can run anywhere from, say, $150 an hour when you have a presenter up to $300, $350 an hour. So you can start to see the advantage of having these individuals not only in your school system, but knowing your staff and students. Just to give you an idea, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, this is one of our coaches. This is our ELA coach. This is at Birchland Park Middle School on one of the professional development days. Not only do we have one full professional development day and half days along with that, but we also use our structured time. So times when we may have traditionally referred to it as a faculty meeting, we now try to get our housekeeping done in about 10 to 15 minutes and use 45 minutes of how we can move our practice, improve our craft. This is professional development with one of our academic coaches at Mapleshade. The lady in blue there is working with staff, and it was one of our professional development days. This is actually where coaches go into the classroom, work with our students, and model best practices. I think that's important for people to really get a grasp of what these individuals do. It's another look at our coaches working with our students. What they also help us do is get better at working with each other and do it in a structure where we're looking at student data, we're understanding the student assessment data, and we're utilizing it to make changes in our instruction this school year, or more importantly, maybe this week. This is a group of teachers working at Mapleshade, looking at student data that's been compiled, where they can see all the recent assessments, whether it be MCAS, whether it be STAR data, or whether it be benchmark reading assessment. They produce sheets like this, and they can start to problem solve for their class list, their class of students, and figure out where do I need to change some of the things that I'm doing to make sure these students are moving forward. Just another look at this group, not only collaborating with each other, but starting to use the technology with each other, and then obviously with our students. And just a quick look how our students are starting to use technology in, this happens to be one of the high school labs, but you have a combination here of sort of your traditional lab in the background, some of the newer equipment that we've brought in with the mobile laptop carts, and then obviously hooking up the musical piece to this. So this student may be studying in one of our music classes. What has all this done for us? Well, it continues to provide results that we're all looking for, such as our students move through our schools, we're seeing 91% of our students go on, at least last year, class 2012, going on to higher ed. Our advanced placement offerings have continued to increase for our students. Our graduation rate remains high. We want it to be higher, but it's 95.3% in 4 years. And a key statistic that the state throws out, usually somewhere in the late fall, early winter, dropout rate remains low. We want to see that become closer to zero. As we continue to invest and try to maintain these type of numbers, one of the things we look to as we put together the budget is what is the governor's budget, which is the only numbers right now that we have, and we're looking for the House budget hopefully within the next 2 weeks. What would the increase be for Chapter 70? We've been just over $9 million, or actually closer to $10 million. The increase in the governor's budget would actually put us over $10 million of Chapter 70 money, or an increase of $364,385. It's been a pretty accurate predictor over the last few years. In FY12, Governor had an increase in the budget for Chapter 70 of $455,268, and that actually became the increase. Last year, Governor had an increase of $390,836, and actually the increase was much more, $636,388. So it's been a good indicator, at least of telling us where we think we should be with expecting Chapter 70 increase. In some cases, we really benefit with an increase much more than expected. All of this has caused people to start to take notice of the East Long Meadow Public Schools. Not only have our coaches helped our students, but people are interested in what we're doing with our literacy program. And our coaches and our director of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, Mrs. Anir, presented in Rhode Island at the National Literacy Conference. In September, our middle school was recognized on an author's website, Doug Wilhelm, for their program, One Book, One School. Not only did Doug Wilhelm come to Birchland Park back in September, but also the program of how we went about at the middle school looking at our summer reading and discussing that book as a school, an entire school, was noted on his website and was there for sharing with other districts, other schools. Our high school principal is presenting, or recently presented, at the ASCD National Conference on technology and how you move schools forward with technology. We have a partnership with the Willie Ross School for the Deaf, and just recently the director of the Willie Ross School and I presented in Pittsburgh at the State Special Ed Directors National Conference. Area districts, mostly through the LPVC, but other districts as well, take a look at some of the programs that we've brought back into our schools, and we have 3 area districts who tuition students into our programs. And then you may have seen this in the fall, Mrs. Donna Salo, one of our parents, PTO members, and just an individual of incredible talent, put us on the map by getting the Stanford University Spark Truck. It's a engineering group that had gone across the country, and they were stopping in major cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, New York City, Boston, and all of a sudden East Long Meadow, Massachusetts popped up on the map. And that actually, they put on their website, that was one of their most entertaining and fun and successful visits of their entire trip across the country. So some of the things that we've invested in over the last few years, people are taking notice. Our students are continuing to do great things. Obviously, it starts with our SMART goals. We want to make sure that we're continuing, anything we do continues to help our students be placed into a standards-based curriculum that's using a tiered instructional model. That we continue to use our interim assessment data, some of the things we looked at in previous slides, to make sure that we can make good decisions. And the key part of this is that they're decisions in the current school year. You're not waiting a full year before you react to challenges you identify. 3 and 4, these goals really govern our culture, our climate, and make sure that all of us are working in an atmosphere where we can be at our best, because it's a nurturing, respectful, and comfortable environment in which to work, so that we can make sure our students can be at their best and our staff can be at their best. And then this one is most specific to the budget process, which is making sure that all our resources are aligned to meet these goals. And that's something we really took to heart as we went through and we changed how we developed our budget this year. Obviously, we have to keep in mind that the state mandates certain conditions for school effectiveness, 11 conditions to be exact. Some of those things that they mentioned in those conditions we already have in place: tiered instructional model, making sure we're aligning to the standards, using data to improve student instruction. We want to make sure we continue to do this and get better at it as we go through any budget development process. Challenges we took into account as we put this together. The last 3 years, actually the last 4 years, we've been in a very beneficial position where we've had federal ERA grants. We've used those grants to move the district forward with technology, to move the district forward with getting interim assessments, but the final grant was an education jobs grant, which had to go into personnel. The remaining amount, as we tried to roll over and squeeze everything we could out of these grants for this fiscal year, was $110,000. So we knew that last year. We explained that we won't have these grants to rely on as we go forward into FY14. We also last year, to reduce impact of things such as transportation cost increases for special education, just special education programming through the LPVC as well as vocational programming going up. We had built up over time $93,000 worth of credit. That's a one-time credit if you use it, which we did last year to make sure that we reduced the impact of our requests last year. We don't have a choice but to move forward with certain mandates that come to us through state regulation or the Department of Education. Things such as we will continue and should continue to move toward the Common Core state standards. That means that we have to not only do a certain amount of curriculum writing to make that transition, but we also have to purchase resources to make sure that we're aligned with these state standards and supporting our students as well as we possibly can. All teachers will soon need to have some type of English language education training, which is called retail training. Some, who will be identified shortly by the Department of Education, will actually have to go through 48 hours of professional development in English language learner education. And so that's something we have to start working on, how we're going to make that happen for our staff in and around the workday. We have to continue to move forward and make sure that our educators are all understanding and using to the best of their ability the new educator evaluation model, and that we're doing things between the schools and the homes to improve the connection and communication, such as utilize web portals such as Edline, which you see at the middle school and the high school, but we currently don't have at our elementary schools. New one that's going to be a joint responsibility between possibly police and the school departments. Fingerprinting is now going to be added to our quarries. So all employees, new employees, will have to be fingerprinted along with getting a criminal background check. And how we accomplish that for roughly 404 employees, that transition plan is already begun and is in the works. So, with all of these mandates, all of these challenges, this year, this team and this group of people over here really decided to look at how do we do things a little bit differently? How do we utilize our best resource, which is our human resources, and how do we sort of maintain a focus, if you will, all the way through this process? And that focus is what initiatives will move the most students forward the quickest with this budget that we're developing. So with that said, we ended up looking at, or finally finalizing, 3 areas that should move our students forward and continue the path that was outlined in the previous slides. And this was no easy process. As if you ever want to come and visit the central office, welcome you all to come in and see. There are multiple chart paper sheets that are hanging in my office that have roughly 20 to 25 initiatives, all which have merit. And this group took the time and the emotional toll of figuring out, okay, how do we narrow that down so we maintain fiscal responsibility and we move our students forward. First one is that we have to have a uniform or a structured curriculum renewal process. As we write curriculum and map our curriculum to make sure that we're meeting the Common Core standards, we also have to be sure that our resources which support that curriculum are aligned to the Common Core state standards. So we're putting in a centralized line item to make sure that after departments, all departments would go through a 5-year cycle. Right now, our math department and our foreign language department are finishing up the first year where they're looking in depth at their resources, their curriculum, and what they feel they need to do to make sure that they continue to support their students as we continue this transition to the Common Core state standards. In year 2 of that cycle, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we can provide them the funding to purchase anything that they've identified might be needed to put our students in the best possible position to continue their learning as we transition to the Common Core state standards. And not only is that a needed cycle, but it also is something that will continue to help us meet our district goals and the conditions for effective schools. At our Meadowbrook School, where our students enter in pre-K and leave in grade 2, really it's a gateway to literacy. And right now we're sharing one coach between our 2 elementary schools, grades 3 through 5, and occasionally are able to provide some professional development to the Meadowbrook staff before school or after school. We feel that if we can continue along this process where we are utilizing instructional coaches to the best of our ability, we should place one at the Meadowbrook School and make sure that we have this same consistent embedded professional development for our teachers throughout the school year at our youngest school. And then finally, we took a look at the high school where we have roughly 900 students when you add LPVEC students and Willie Ross students who are in our schools. And we have been dealing with a model that probably now is truly outdated, where we have one assistant principal and we have a part-time athletic director who also handles dean of students responsibilities. And this is a model that is limited at best, given that athletic directing really is a full-time job in this day and age. And at the high school level, traditionally across the state, as we move into a different paradigm of education, you've heard me talk about this the last couple of years, it's really our principals and our assistant principals who are becoming the educational leaders and the coaches and the professional development facilitators at the high school level. And right now that's falling on 2 individuals, our current principal and assistant principal. And we really should expand that. It's probably best seen if you take a look at just area high schools around us, going from Agawam down to us at the bottom. You see how many assistant principals each district has, whether they have an athletic director who is full-time or not, and how many students they have. And then all the way over to the right-hand side, you see what the ratio is of administrator per student. And if we just think safety, right, that would be something that would fit into district goal 3. We're thinking culture and putting people in the best possible atmosphere to learn. Anytime in education you can reduce the ratio, you're personalizing education and you're making it safer for students and staff. And right now, at least in this look at Western Mass high schools, we're at the highest administrator per student ratio. So those were the 3 areas that really we felt of the 20 to 25 would push us forward and met our criteria. What will impact the most students the quickest in this budget? With that said, we also have to take into account where are we seeing continued challenges in our operational budget. And these are areas such as special education, contracted services. This is services that may be above and beyond the classroom and the school day, where we may have to go out and contract with an agency or an individual to provide these services for students who may have this service in their IEP. Summer school special education programs, that's something that continues to expand for some of our more intensive programs. The Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative provides all our special education transportation for students who are leaving our district and going to programs outside the district. And that has an increases generally every year. Unfortunately, we live in a very litigious society, and our legal services are increasing each year. Our bus fleet right now, we have 4 buses that have been in service 10 years. Those buses and all of our buses are becoming more computerized, so just maintaining them to make sure that they stay on the road and servicing our students in the safest way is becoming more costly. And then maintaining our buildings and basic cleaning supplies and paper supplies to maintain our building, or custodial supplies, actually costs more money, although I agree with it, to go green. But it costs more money to do so, and we've been trying to do so. And then athletic costs continue to rise, whether it be league fees, official fees, or transportation around our programs for our athletes. All of that, and you saw this in the presentation earlier, became a request for $27,348,585, which is roughly a $1.2 million increase from the last fiscal year. A lot of care and time was put into putting that together so that we did practice or continue to practice fiscal responsibility. The unfortunate thing is this year we can't share with the town an ERA grant of any kind. We've run to the end of those. However, judging from the earlier slide, some of the things we did with those ERA grants are now providing results for our students, and we don't want to in any way diminish the possibility of where our students can go. With that, you may have questions for the school department or appropriations or capital.
Excuse me, Gordon, after a nice presentation like that,
Thank
as
you.
a layperson to understand all your numbers and figures, way beyond my scope. I do have a question, however, when it comes to the priorities set about by the word pride. Pride is pride in what you do and who you work with.
Sure.
Now, when I can look at the high school stadium and see the lacrosse team practicing when I go to an appropriations meeting, where the lights are on. When I come home after the meeting, the lights are still on, but the practice is over. Now, I reported that to the office, and they're going to take care of it. That's fine. I walked behind the high school one day, and I found cut-up baseballs right after I saw an athletic director go out with boxes of brand-new balls. Now, I grew up in an area where a baseball was taped with electrician's tape. So it means something to me to see the waste of that kind of things going on. Getting back to the word pride, I think we all have to have pride in our facilities. I have pride in what you have said about what you're doing for the kids educationally. But I think on the other side, there's an area we could teach these kids to be a little more responsible for what is given to them, because a lot of us didn't have that opportunity when we were young. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that certainly not only has incredible merit, it's something that we're doing more and more of. Not only soon in the next few weeks will you see a digital citizenship week, which starts to teach students and parents, for that matter, to take more responsibility in how they use technology and electronics and so forth. And that's just one example of discussions where we're getting in. How do you not only have pride in what you do and who you are, but how you represent yourself and your school? Along with that, just today, our district technology committee brought in students so we could have a collaborative discussion, adults and students, as to where we think the future is going with technology and items that we purchase. And I think those type of discussions go a long way with not only building pride, but if you build understanding as to why did we make this purchase? How is it working? How are you taking advantage of it, such as the slide that you saw of the students using the computer lab. The more we can get into those type of discussions, both formal and informal, I think we build that pride and we build that responsibility. One of the things that I used to say as an assistant principal when it was my responsibility to start off an orientation, we talked about with the high school comes more freedom, but with more freedom comes more responsibility. And I think that's similar to what you're getting at, if I'm understanding your question and statement. And so those are discussions we have to continue to have. But thank you for stating it.
Thank you, Gordon. Our old phrase that you and I developed quite a few years ago, return on investment.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question on capital planning and recreation. There's a list here that says Brown property design. There's already been $25,000 spent when the Brown property was originally purchased out of the CPC. They've come up with 4 designs. The first question would be, what's the additional $150,000 for? The second question would be, we already have an open space and rec plan, and the number 1 goal of that was any design or use of property that the town's purchased, that the very first funding will be with grant money. I'm just wondering what grants have been applied for. Have we been turned down for any grants, or are we not seeking any grants to do this to begin with?
In terms of, is this mic working? Yeah. In terms of grants, I don't have the answer to that question. The Capital Planning Committee itself, which of course, as you're well aware, is a volunteer committee, does not apply for grants on behalf of the town. That would be through the select board and or the appropriate department heads. So I can't answer your question in terms of grants. What I can explain is the mere fact that the project is on that list does not mean that that project is going to be recommended forward for funding. That is one of the 51 projects that were submitted for consideration by a department head, and I think that he really did that with the intent of getting conversation started and getting some excitement built around developing that property for recreational use. If that's what he was setting out to accomplish, he did accomplish that. So in terms of your grant question, I'm sorry I don't have the answers to that. And at this point, like I said, the mere fact that a project is on there doesn't mean it's going to come forward at annual town meeting for recommendation. Again, 51 projects, $3.6 million, and we're looking at about $1 million in funding.
With capital planning, don't you usually do a 5-year plan? Is this on there for a subsequent year, 2015, 2016?
We do tell all department heads that projects that they feel are important and go unfunded in this fiscal year should carry through into their 5-year capital plan. So yes, we do present at town meeting a 5-year capital plan, which I might make the comment are not projects that have been fully vetted, but they are projects that have been identified by the department heads as important to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good evening. I'd like to follow up on Ralph's question. Typically, when you do a study, that's a standalone town meeting warrant article. So just curious why you included that in the capital. Because I think the town should vote on that case by case.
Why it's included in it was submitted to us as a project.
Okay.
When it's submitted to us as a project, it's considered along with all other projects. Like I said, the mere fact that it's on that list, there's 51 projects on that list. I can guarantee you not all 51 projects are coming forward for recommendation. That 51 projects represents $3.6 million in requests. We don't have $3.6 million to spend on capital.
Okay. Maybe you could just review that, because prior studies have been voted on case by case. Russ is shaking his head yes.
I'm not sure what you mean by review that. The project is being reviewed along with all the other 51 projects.
Well, this is a hearing, right? So you could remove that, right, from that plan? You could take the 150 right out of there until you resolve that.
You're not understanding what I'm saying, perhaps. There's 51 projects on that list,
okay,
representing $3.6 million in requests.
Right, and it's all bundled.
I can guarantee you, you are not going to be asked at town meeting to fund $3.6 million worth of projects.
Okay.
Projects will be removed from that, or not brought forth for recommendation from that list.
Good. Next question. I saw $75,000 for a phone system upgrade in Birchland. And it seems like yesterday we just voted on that. My kids were young, so I don't understand why we need a new phone system.
Well, I can tell you that since that school was built, having dealt with a facility in my own work myself, that the technology has changed drastically since that school was built and the phone system installed there. The IT director is currently working on a multi-year plan to bring all of our town phone systems under the same system, if you will, all a voice over IP system, which has really proven to be highly efficient and, in fact, over the long haul, cost savings.
Okay. I did notice that in past years, you did have a summary sheet on headcount change. Did you just run out of room on your PowerPoint slides, or do you have a huge increase?
A summary sheet on what?
Headcount.
Number of personnel employed by the town you're referring to?
Yeah, headcount.
Yeah, that will be part of the annual town meeting warrant. When we complete the entire budget submittal, that will be on there again.
At this current snapshot, do you have a guesstimate?
No.
You don't?
No.
Come on.
No, we really don't.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah, it is April Fool's Day, isn't it? Yeah.
No, today's not April
You're
Fool's
running.
Day when it comes to the budget, because that's not something I actually fool around with. As I said, there were 2 new members of the Board of Selectmen who kind of got a little late start. And so last week we received all of their budget recommendations. And in their budget recommendations are certain increases to personnel. We have not acted, we've not made a recommendation one way or the other as an appropriations committee. As part of the school department presentation you just saw, they'd like to add a couple of staff members to that. That hasn't been decided yet as well. So April Fools or not, I really don't have an answer for you on whether there's going to be an increase in town personnel.
All right, so like, does Gordon have a breakdown of the 1.2 million and what those line items are?
If you take a look at our school system webpage, there's an executive summary that will break down where the increases have come from.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I just thought it'd be appropriate if you had everyone here. I mean, you don't have a backup slide, you could just throw that up there?
I don't have it in the slide.
All right.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you all for coming this evening.